Hi, everyone. It's Christine from HubSpot here. I am joined by Justine Jordan, the VP of Marketing at Litmus, Jason Rodriguez, the Community Manager at Litmus, and Nick Barrasso, our Email Marketing Demand Generation Manager at HubSpot. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So today we're talking about the 10 things you did not know about email marketing on mobile. So the hashtag is Mobile Hangout. And before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that this is being recorded. Everyone's going to get the recording and the slides in an email either tonight or tomorrow. And then before we get started, I just wanted to mention that these 10 tips, testing is the most important thing in marketing, and I'm sure you guys all know this. So take all this with a grain of salt and know that these 10 things we're going to talk about, just make sure that, what you're not doing, test everything. These tips are not a silver bullet, and Justine and everyone will talk more about this, but Justine, take it away.
Awesome. Hi. Thanks, Christine, and welcome, everyone. Now we get to do that awkward dance where you try to screen share and pray that the technology works, and it actually does what it's supposed to. So bear with me just a second. Well, you can't see me anymore, and instead you'll see some beautiful emails. All right. What you didn't know about mobile email. And again, I know Christine already mentioned the hashtag, but we'd love for you to hang out with us on Twitter. You can shout at us at Litmus App and HubSpot, and we will try to jump in and answer any questions that we can't get to today. So let's go ahead and kick this bad boy off and tell you about maybe what you didn't know about mobile email. But first, a little bit of context. Growth in mobile email has been absolutely insane over the last few years. When I started first talking about mobile email, which was like back in the early 2011 or so, for better or worse, I've been talking about this for a long time. I used to get on these webinars and I'd get up on stage at conferences and I'd be like, guys, 8%, that's almost 10% of your audience is opening your emails on mobile devices. Like, that's a really big deal. And looking back, that seems like nothing because today it's more like 56%. These stats vary from month to month. We publish the latest and greatest every month at emailclientmarketshare.com. But generally speaking, it is above 50% on average as a general rule now. And that's a 600% growth over the last 5 years. So it's not going anywhere. It is here to stay, and you better get used to it, in other words. So we're going to talk about some ways that you can leverage that and make it all it's worth. And you might even say, like, well, what do I care if people are opening my emails on mobile devices? A survey by Blue Hornet asked people, what do you do if you get a mobile email that looks bad? And the results were kind of surprising. 80% of the people that answered this survey said they would delete the email, which is pretty bad. But 30% of people said that they would unsubscribe. And I just want to kind of pause there for a second and let that sink in, because that's really, really huge. If you send an email that is unusable or unreadable or just generally like doesn't look great on a small screen and someone unsubscribes because of it, you can never email them again. So you've just lost a contact from your database, whether that's a lead, a customer, like what have you. You can never email them again. So I really want to underscore the point here that that experience does matter, and it's not just a matter of performance, it's also a matter of experience. So I know I just told you that 56% of people open email on a mobile device, but it doesn't always ring true. That's not always the case. Our audience is not your audience, and every audience is a little bit different. So while us, the experts, can tell you that on average, yes, 56% of emails are open on mobile devices, you really need to know your audience. For example, Litmus, which is a small B2B software company, we have, on a good day, about 15% of our audience opening on a mobile device, and that's for our email. Our website is even lower than that. We have fewer people visiting our website on mobile. And I joke that only because we participate in Hangouts like this and we talk about how to make your emails look great on mobile is our mobile open rate even that high. It's just people checking to make sure that we're practicing what we're preaching. So again, really, really low rate, not anywhere near that average of 50% or higher. Whereas a B2C company that creates a mobile iOS and Android app, MapMyRun, might have a mobile email open rate of more like 70%. So you really need to know your audience. Again, nothing is a silver bullet. all of these tips that we might be giving you today might be completely irrelevant to you and your audience if no one is opening on mobile. So that's the first place, by and large, to start. The other thing you might not know about the mobile inbox is just so important the actual inbox part of it is. So one of the primary things that people look at before they open an email and before they decide to open your email is actually just the boring stuff in the inbox. It's kind of like, you know, when you Google something and you're looking at a page full of Google search results. Imagine if you could, it's like optimizing your headlines and your meta tags and things like that. It's just the inbox or the email equivalent of that. So people are going to look at your from name, your subject line, and then your preview text. And I think that preview text is probably the most underutilized and underestimated part of the mobile inbox optimization equation. You've got more text than your subject line or your from name combined to really make an impact and encourage people to open. So from names can be things like your brand name, it can be a person's name, your subject line. Everyone's read tons and tons of articles about how to optimize subject lines, but don't forget about the preview text. It's that little bit of text after the subject line that people also see in their mobile inbox. So rather than spending all of that time focusing on your subject line, which might only be 35 characters, really sink some time into creating some creative and useful preview text that might really bring it home. So if you ask me, well, Justine, what the heck am I supposed to do with that preview text? I have some great suggestions for you. We have a whole optimization guide at that bit.ly link. You should definitely check it out. But some kind of not so great examples, a lot of times like a default template that you might get your hands on will have some text at the top of it. It says like having trouble viewing or to view this email as a web page, click here. That's definitely not what we want to see in preview text because it's not very helpful. It's not very engaging. It just is sort of meh. So some much better examples from some fellow Boston companies like Help Scout and Wistia. Help Scout says, please take a few minutes to answer some questions that will help us improve, ... Wistia says, scrappy beginnings, we all started somewhere, early videos and lessons learned. Whereas Sprout Social and Meetup take some different approaches. One says, here's some next steps, and another kind of makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So you can take a lot of different strategies with your preview text. I've seen some people run A/B tests on preview text, and if they tease to a specific article in their email with that preview text, guess what article in the email gets the most clicks? The one they mentioned in the preview text. So it can work, and it can really be suggestive. You could also use it to be like kind of quirky and on brand. Lots of creative ways that you can use preview text, or lots of really impactful ways you can use preview text. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, or open it up for any sort of discussion that you guys might want to have.
No, I'll definitely take it away. So Justine, talk a little bit. Let's see if I can get my screen sharing here.
It's that awkward dance. We love it.
Love it, absolutely. All right, cool. So Justine talked a little bit about getting people to actually open things using things like preview text, your subject line, your from name, which is really important. But as you mentioned earlier, once people are looking at your emails, if you're not optimizing for mobile, then there's a lot of things that can go wrong. People can delete your email. People can unsubscribe to your email list. A lot of problems you want to avoid. So there's a couple of things that you'll likely run into with mobile emails that could cause those issues and cause those problems that create these really bad user experiences for your subscribers. One of the first ones are these blue links that a lot of you have probably seen. This is where mobile apps, they highlight things that are potentially useful to subscribers, useful to your users. These are typically things like dates, times, phone numbers, addresses, anything that might be useful in another app, like your calendar app, your contacts list. They will turn those into actual links within the email themselves. So that can create a lot of problems, though, if you're using specific design elements, specifically using this light text on a dark background, like in this example here. You can see that the dates and the times were changed to these blue underlined links, but on that dark background, you can't really read them. It creates a huge usability problem. So this is one of those things you might not know about, or you might not know how to actually take care of if you have run into the problem before.
Hey, Jason?
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually can't see what you're talking about. Would you mind trying to reshare your screen again?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think this is a really important problem, and the example that we have in the slide really brings it home. But yay, technology.
Are you guys seeing it now?
Yeah, there we
Awesome.
go.
Perfect.
Perfect.
So yeah, this example is the perfect example of that light text on a dark background and the problem that occurs when those links are auto-linked for you, whether or not you want them to. So this bit.ly link above, we have a great guide to actually taking care of that problem using HTML and CSS. And that guide's great. There's actually been an updated solution to it as well. That article is updated with an even easier code fix for taking care of these auto-linking links in mobile applications. But it's definitely something to be aware of. It's a big problem if you run into it, and it causes accessibility issues, usability issues, and something you really, really want to be aware of. Along with links, a lot of people put in navigation elements into their mobile emails, which I have mixed feelings about. On the desktop, it can be very good to have those navigation bars in your emails, but the problem is that when you're looking at emails on mobile devices, you have a lot smaller screen size to work with. And if you're not accounting for that, then you'll run into issues like this, where those long navigation links are broken out into different lines. And this is usually caused by mobile apps enlarging the text in the email itself. So iOS is famous for resizing any text below 13 pixels into up to 14 so that it's more readable for users. So if you're using really small text on navigation elements, on buttons, anything like that, you could run into issues like this where it creates a really weird, awkward look for your navigation bar and is a lot less usable, too. It's confusing and less usable, and so that's something you really want to avoid. I would personally make the argument that you might not need a navigation bar in your email campaign, especially for mobile audiences. Your whole point with an email is to get them to take some action in the email, so that's usually your main CTA. And lots of extra links like this, especially navigation bars, can sometimes distract from that main call to action. So this is part a coding thing, part a design issue, and part strategy too. You need to take a look at your email campaign and see and test whether or not you actually need that navigation bar in there. If not, you can lose it. It's one less thing you have to worry about with that text resizing. And it usually makes for a much more honed, specific email campaign that will work a lot better in the long run for you. And one thing you really, really want to make sure of, this is a big one. This is one of my favorite points that a lot of people haven't fully taken into account for mobile email campaigns, is that bigger is almost always better for mobile emails. And that carries over to text sizes, to button sizes, to imagery. You want to do whatever you possibly can to make sure that your mobile users can read your message and understand what you're talking about in your mobile email campaigns. So if you're using bigger text, bigger buttons that are more tappable for different size fingers and thumbs, then you're already ahead of the game. So you have a couple of good guidelines here that you want to keep your body copy at least 16 pixels, your headlines 22 pixels or above. Buttons are the big one because, again, your entire goal with an email campaign is get somebody to take action. So you want buttons and links to be at least 44 pixels by 44 pixels, which is a guideline that Apple actually introduced in their human interface guidelines for app developers. But they found that that size was a good base for most finger sizes to be able to actually tap on a mobile screen. So make sure your buttons are big enough that people can actually use them on those smaller devices. Likewise, you want to make sure that any of those major links are surrounded with a healthy amount of white space. So again, that kind of baseline is around 40 pixels, which gives you enough room for navigating the email, for not accidentally tapping these different links. This is really important, too, for those link clusters that some emails tend to have if you have a list of links or a lot of in-copy links within the text themselves. If you have really low line heights or that text is really close together, then it could be really frustrating for your users. They will try to tap on one link and get a completely different one. So you want to make sure there's enough white space around those elements so that things are easy to read, easy to tap, and easy to interact with. But yeah, bigger is better. Simplify your layouts. Make that text bigger so that it's easier to use for all of your mobile users. Part of that,
I always have a big tip that I give people with that is that you have a roving white space detector that is attached to your body, and it is your thumb. Like that whole thing about making things like finger friendly and touch tappable, I cannot emphasize enough. If you don't know what a pixel is because you're not very technical and you're not a designer, and that's totally okay, like grab your thumb. We've all got two of them, at least I hope everyone does. I apologize to anyone that doesn't. and make sure that you just smash your finger like on your screen, like take your phone, like see if there's enough room, or if you're even frustrated by the own emails that you're sending. So no excuses. You have a white space detector attached to your body. Sorry for interrupting you, Jason.
No, that's absolutely a good point. It's typically easy to send yourself a test and see it on your own device, and that's probably one of the best ways you can get a sense of whether or not your emails are really usable for your subscribers. So definitely keep that in mind. That's great advice. So kind of going along with that bigger is better theme is understanding the design of your campaigns and how they react to these different screen sizes across desktop, across mobile devices, across tablets, whatever. So a really important thing you might not be aware of is that there's a couple of different approaches to handling your emails on mobile devices. We generally break this down into 3 categories with varying levels of technical ability involved with actually implementing them. So the first one is this mobile-aware approach, which is really nice if you're not that technical. It's not really doing anything fancy with the code of your emails. It's more taking into account those mobile users from the very beginning. So you're using things like larger text, larger buttons, a lot more white space in your design. So even when that design is scaled down on a smaller screen, it's still readable, it's still usable for those mobile subscribers. It's nothing special from a development perspective. It's just looking at the design and making sure it's simplified, the text is big enough, and the buttons are tappable for your mobile subscribers. If you want to do some more advanced stuff, then you can use responsive design, which comes in 2 flavors. This traditional responsive approach that's similar to what most websites do, which involves something called CSS3 media queries, which are kind of like logical switches for displaying different styles and styling that campaign based on the screen size of the device you're looking at. But that's not supported everywhere. So there was another approach developed called hybrid or spongy development, which kind of uses the concept of a fluid email by default and constrains that on desktop screens so it doesn't get too wide or anything like that to make sure that it works in as many places as possible. But understanding those different mobile approaches is really vital, especially when you run into really problematic email clients like Gmail. Gmail doesn't understand that traditional responsive email approach. It strips out media queries, it strips out styles in the head of your email. So it's ripping out that code that really drives that mobile approach, that different layouts. So you run into weird issues with it, where this desktop email's squished down on mobile Gmail clients and provides a less than optimal experience. So you can see in this example here, iOS Mail handles that traditional responsive approach. It drops some of those navigation items in the nav bar. It increases that text size. It makes that See Deals button really big, really wide, easy to use. But Inbox by Gmail doesn't understand that approach, so you still get that desktop layout just kind of scrunched down on that smaller screen, which is a less than optimal experience. So there's definitely techniques out there that you can use to account for that and make sure that your emails are really optimized, really honed in design-wise for those different mobile subscribers. And if you're not that technical, which I know a lot of people aren't, it gets fairly complicated. And those techniques are refined over time. Lots of new tricks that come out. Email clients are notorious for introducing really weird bugs that we need to hack around. There's tons of good resources out there to get you started if you're not a coder. So at Litmus, we actually introduced something called the Community Template Gallery, which has a whole bunch of different email templates that come in a lot of different varieties: mobile-aware approach, the traditional responsive approach, and the hybrid or spongy approach. They're all free to use. They cover a wide range of use cases, everything from marketing newsletters to transactional account management, all types of different things, different styles that you can check out, use for free, pop into your ESP, and be on your way. We also have something that's been around for a while now called the Litmus Slate templates, which is kind of our milestone collection of templates that we released a while back. But those all use that hybrid spongy approach, so they work well across clients, including Gmail clients, where that traditional responsive approach isn't really understood by Gmail. So there's tons of resources out there, lots more besides what we have, but all of those things are great tools to give you a stepping stone to making these better mobile email campaigns for your subscribers.
And Jason's way too humble, and he would never say this, but he actually created those Slate templates, and I can attest to the fact that he knows what he's talking about, and he hand created those himself, so they're pretty awesome.
That's true. Thank you.
Anytime.
Awesome. I can take it from here,
Yeah.
unless you guys want to talk about a little bit more what Jason was saying.
And feel free to ask any questions if anybody has them. Yeah.
Nick, you've been awfully quiet. Have you utilized any of these strategies in the emails that you've been creating at HubSpot, or do you think anything is just totally off the wall bad advice or something that didn't work for you? Because you never know with email. I'm always surprised that I always say I have this silly joke. I say I like big buttons and I cannot lie, but sometimes text links work better. It really just blows my mind. You'd think that a button is way more clear. It's really obviously clickable, but some people find better success with other stuff. So I'm always surprised.
Yeah, and I think that speaks a lot to the industry. Before HubSpot, I'd spent at least 3 or 4 years in more e-commerce and B2C. So a lot of those learnings and kind of wiring of my brain is kind of changing a lot since starting at HubSpot. The way we do things is obviously different. So yeah, I wouldn't say any of that advice is off the wall wrong. Definitely not. Yeah, you guys are the big time leaders. I've been following Litmus for a long time, so yeah, it's all great advice.
Well, what advice do you have for us? So that you're going to school us up on. We like our beautiful HTML emails, but I know that you've got some bombs to drop about plain text, right?
Yeah, it's coming. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen right now with you all. Let's see. Bear with me for 1 minute. Not a minute. All right. Can everyone see okay?
Yep.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, like Justine said, I'm going to be thinking about more, image heavy versus text heavy here. And we did a survey. I think a lot of these tend to come out this way, where people say they definitely want the prettier image heavy templates. And as a marketer myself, that's something I've always kind of skewed towards. It's more creative, it looks nice, etc. And even though people tend to say that they like these mobile, not mobile, image-heavy templates, typically what ends up happening is they end up engaging way more with text-based. So I'm going to click ahead here just to kind of show you a lot of what HubSpot does and all these tests that we're always running. Again, way more text-heavy here on the left-hand side. Literally no images whatsoever, not even colored buttons. And what we end up seeing time and time again is typically the numbers are about 25% better engagement-wise for the text-based. Again, we preface this entire hangout by saying there's no silver bullet. But for us, and I think a lot of the time with B2B, when you see something coming from somebody that's a little bit more text-based, and you get that one-to-one interaction feeling, you tend to get a lot of interaction from those emails. So for us, and I think I've seen a lot in B2B land, text emails have performed much better. I've been always running tests, even just including one image in some of our templates, and you'd think, adding that one more clickable element would give you obviously more clickable space and someone's going to engage. But time and time again, those numbers are surprisingly the opposite. So again, there's no silver bullet here, but I think it's at least worth testing and seeing, what your different industries could be doing, or different segments even.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially in B2B, the plain text approach can work really well because people are expecting sales outreach or that type of thing. Whereas I always make the analogy, if you're trying to sell jewelry or a beach vacation, it's a lot harder to sell those emotionally driven products without showing a picture of the jewelry or a picture of the beach.
Most definitely. And we always like to have a backup, obviously, just in case things aren't loading. That's kind of standard. Hopefully, everyone's backing up their templates with something that will show if images aren't loading properly and all of that.
Yeah, that's actually called multi-part MIME, right? You have to package up the HTML version and the plain text version together so that it actually can help you increase deliverability too. So you don't want to send just plain text or just HTML. Even your plain text emails, like in your example there, Nick, the fact that the text in the email is actually hyperlinked and you can click on it means that that is an HTML email.
Yeah. Yep.
So I call that plain text-like. It kind of pretends to be plain text, but it really is HTML. Anyway, can dive deeper into Q&A later on if you guys have any questions about that. But that's an interesting point that I think sometimes gets missed.
Yeah, definitely. I think the slide could probably be more so called just text versus image rather than plain text versus HTML. So I appreciate you calling that out. Thanks, Justine. Cool. I'm going to jump ahead to something that's probably always brought up in any kind of email design or web design thing for the last decade or more, is being above the fold. One thing, though, that Justine actually sent me was this tweet that I really like a lot from Josh, and it kind of just talks more to the fact that more and more we're being conditioned to be on our phones and to always be scrolling. So kind of thinking about that text and image template thing feeding into this, maybe we really shouldn't be worrying so much about how tall your emails are. So there's a lot of things that could be said that say you don't really have to think about above the fold so much these days. If it's social media feeds that we're always going through, mobile web, etc. I think more and more we're getting used to kind of flicking through, and that could be the same for mobile email. Though, more traditionally, at least again at HubSpot and a lot of B2B, we end up seeing it is still great to, still have some kind of CTA, some kind of link. On the left-hand side here, there's a text link that's kind of it's still conversational, obviously related to the entire content there, and it kind of flows through. Whereas on the right-hand side here, we have that kind of more traditional, again, clear kind of button-like image that someone's going to see right away. So for these, again, we've seen it's nice to have something up near the top, give someone that immediate gratification of clicking through and engaging, just in case you're not losing those people further down in the templates. And for here, this kind of ties back to what Jason was talking about and Justine about kind of just the general design. And if someone sees a bad mobile email, what that could mean. And I think that kind of ties in a little bit to above the fold, because if people are fine with scrolling these days, you're still going to be annoyed, potentially, if you're scrolling just because something like on the right-hand side here, there's just terrible white space that's kind of jacking everything up and pushing things down, I should say. And if you're going to go ahead and scroll down and make your users do that, at least follow through with the design there. So again, on the left-hand side, a little bit more kind of clustered together, hard to differentiate. Whereas if this was up near the top and it was kind of more separated out, if it be color or whatnot, that might have done a little bit better, at least in my eyes. All right, here's a fun one for everybody. So GIFs, or GIFs, but I say GIFs. So these days, I'd say the last 2-3 years especially, GIFs have been blowing up on the internet, a lot of memes and so on. And I think it's always great for people to kind of understand, obviously, their brand before thinking about doing something like this, but I think it could be a fun test. I like to break these up into kind of like 3 E's. So I have an entertaining, enticing, and explaining. And I think if you're going to use one of these, it has to serve a purpose, obviously. So something on the left-hand side here, it was a Netflix ad, a Netflix email, and it kind of creates that mood. It instills the tone of the email, and it's kind of fun to kind of see a little bit of that slow movement. In the middle here, this is actually an Ann Taylor Loft email, and just a little bit, it tends to grab your eye just a little bit more, and it's simple. It draws your attention. And on the right-hand side, I like these the most. Maybe it's because of my background, but when you see something like an email come from an app or a certain website, and like we try to do this too, try to actually show what has changed with your platform potentially. So obviously we're still trying to get some engagement in this email, but if you can actually keep these people engaged and show them useful content, whether it be GIFs, I think it's definitely worth trying out. It might not be.
Sorry, I love that slide so much because I feel like using GIFs in email should also be thought about in terms of what you're doing in the buyer's journey. Like we talked about this before, is like if you're in the delight stage of your buyer's journey, then sending GIFs would be great, but if you're trying to convert, then it can be super distracting. So I feel like using GIFs, you should test how they perform in each stage of the buyer's journey. So that's definitely a cool slide.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the explaining ones too, because it just really goes to show that animated GIFs, and I'm Team GIF too, don't worry, Nick. I think Jason is too. It's not just for B2C. Like you can use an animated GIF in a B2B environment as like a product demo, essentially, in your email, which can be really powerful. The other thing, and I think, Christine, you kind of just mentioned this, is the distraction factor. like animated GIFs are super cool and they catch your attention, and that's something you need to be aware of. If you put an animated GIF in an email, but your primary CTA is to go do something else, you might actually find that people are more intrigued by the GIF and even want to click on the GIF. So maybe putting a button in the GIF isn't a bad idea, and kind of pausing for several frames on that button so that people do have something to click. Because otherwise, I've definitely seen A/B tests where the animated GIF almost distracts from the primary purpose of the message. So either make the GIF the primary purpose or incorporate it a little bit better into the experience there.
And I know that sometimes they can be really heavy in emails, so I know there's like hacks out there that can make the file sizes smaller, but that's also something to note, that if you are going to include them in an email, to make sure that you're kind of optimizing for the weight of those two.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely tools out there you can use to compress that further. If you're really hands-on, you can use something like Photoshop to manually cut frames or limit colors. That can really reduce that size. That's an excellent point. You really have to keep an eye on that, because you really don't want your mobile subscribers downloading something that's 3-4 megabytes in size and cutting in their data plan, because that's whether or not it looks good in the email, that's going to frustrate them as users and could lead to future unsubscribes.
Most definitely, and not to go back too much, but I know, Justine, I'll always love to hear your input about just general above the fold too, because I know Litmus has a certain stance on that, even just terminology.
I don't know if it's Litmus's, but it's generally, I have an opinion about it.
I'll say it that way then.
Yeah, I mean, I find that if I'm bored in any context, that's what I end up doing, is going to my phone and just scrolling away. And Josh Porter's tweet, Josh Porter's tweet, really struck with me when I first read it, I mean, back in January of 2014, because it is a small observation with huge implications. If people are mindlessly scrolling, you almost have to think about interjecting friction into their experience, like getting them to stop scrolling and getting them to click is almost the more important thing, rather than just cramming a bunch of stuff above the fold. So it's like, how compelling of a CTA can you write? How compelling can your message be, where someone actually stops that behavior and starts paying attention, rather than that mindless. So.
Perfect.
There are some really great newsletters out there. Like Trello has a really great newsletter, and if you open on mobile, like they really make sure that the CTAs, like Jason was saying, are huge and they're relevant, and you're scrolling, and they have enough links where there's enough of a scroll, but there aren't like 25,000 CTAs. So they do a really great job.
Yeah, they're really good at using color and design too effectively. Like it's nice and bright and big and bold.
Yeah.
So it kind of creates that interest and cause you to stop scrolling and take notice that way too. One thing to keep in mind too is, while I'm generally of the standpoint that there's not so much a fold anymore because people are trained to scroll, is you still want to keep an eye on that, especially for mobile audiences downloading large emails. If you have something that's massive and you literally I've seen people take huge articles from their blog and dump them all in a single email newsletter, which is this massive long thing you're going to be scrolling for the next 3 minutes, That's a lot of information for people to download to actually digest on a mobile device, and it's probably working against you and your campaign strategy, dumping all that in there. So I'm not too averse to longer emails, but at some point you need to keep an eye on it to make sure it's not massive.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
You just hijacked your slide, Nick. Sorry.
Oh, no, I like it. I'm actually just going to wrap with one more, which is more just kind of a small insight. I think just when I think of mobile, especially these days, I think GIFs were and are kind of big, but I think emojis are becoming more and more popular. So what I kind of did for this email, if any of the people listening right now are joining us, they got an email from HubSpot. I always like to do tests, obviously, and even just this simple test, obviously the copy is a little bit different, but the emoji subject line really did great for us. And I think this was just a little bit of a push for me to really start doing more testing with this. So, open rates at least 2 or 3% percentage points above the actual first one. I think this kind of speaks to how I feel generally about emails. It comes down to all the components. It's not just your subject line, and everything has to tie together. So, I kind of urge people, again, to kind of play with this a little bit. Product Hunt, they use a ton of emojis, and that's really fun to always get their emails on the regular. And actually, one thing that was nice about this is usually when you're measuring subject lines for performance, open rate's the maybe one and potentially only metric you're looking at. But for this, I actually had 2x click-through rate on the subject line with emojis. So again, I think that says something about, if you're capturing someone just from a subject line, potentially that could actually cause someone to click way more. It's kind of a little bit of that delight or that differentiation. It could be a little novel, obviously, and you don't want to be doing this all the time. But I think when planned, it could be something fun for users to see.
So having the emojis in the subject line actually affected the click inside of the email?
That's right. Yeah, all the entire template. I don't have them here to show you, sorry, but the template was the exact same. Yeah.
I was going to say, that's two observations there. I love how testable email is and how fairly easy it is to test an email, because it's not like running a website test where you have to get a certain number of visitors, or the statistical significance definitely counts with email, but I love how iterative it is. Like, just doing one subject line test can tell you so much, and it's a fairly straightforward thing to do. But I think the other thing is that so many people stop at subject line tests and they don't test other parts of their email. Test your from name, test your preview text, test things like text CTAs versus button CTAs, hero image versus no hero image, long emails versus short emails. Like, the sky is the limit. You should test everything. And also the point that Christine made about the subject line actually impacting the click rate is also huge. I find those kinds of tests fascinating. So you said you had, like 2 or 3 percentage points higher of an open rate, but almost double the click rate?
Sure. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So you can't look at just one metric either. Like, you have to look at, I guess, the whole picture to really kind of see how those tests perform.
Yeah, and it's really cool, like, to learn more about your audience, because even the tests that I run on landing pages, because I do campaigns for HubSpot, we find nuances about our audience that we've never learned before. So it almost helps you frame all the work that you do in the future. So testing is like you said, the silver bullet. Like, there is no magic wand that you can wave and have a perfect email or a perfect landing page. But the more you test, the more you learn about your audience and optimize everything you do.
Yeah. Not to put you on the spot, Christine, but didn't we run an A/B test on the landing page for this particular Hangout?
We did. So we have a new landing page template at HubSpot that our awesome Brandon Buzz team designed, and it's very modern. We have like a 3 form that drops you down to a lower form, and there's all these components like the preview and images, and there's just a lot of cool different modules, as opposed to the one landing page that was like the image, the form, the body copy, and there was no folds. Like, it just had one page, but this page has like 3 folds. And I think it was like a 4 to 5% higher conversion rate on the page that actually did the fold. So
it's not all about the fold for landing pages anyway. Wow, look at this. It's all coming full circle.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we're B2B, but there are a bazillion companies out there that probably test for B2C and all that sort of thing. So I think it really depends on your audience. Like, we know that having a fold decreases conversion rates for our B2B audience. But I'm sure, I don't know, the audience out there, you guys should definitely test things with like the fold and scrolling. And Nick, you had a slide that had the CTA, both plain text and HTML, that were above the fold. But it'd be cool to see for everyone out there what that works like for you. Like, maybe it's plain text where the CTA is way at the bottom of the email, or maybe it's HTML when it's right up front. So definitely worth testing everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And then oh, go ahead.
Oh, so the last thing about landing pages too, like, just speaking about having that like holistic viewpoint about how everything is working, and this is even a challenge for like companies like Litmus. I think people think that, well, we must know what we're talking about. We get all our stuff together. We can test everything and measure everything, but that's definitely not the case. Because sometimes you see emails that have like really high like open or click rates, but if they get to the landing page and then just no one, like in this case, fills out the form to like attend the Hangout or buys your product or whatever you're trying to get them to do, like, your email could perform really, really, really well, but it could just all fall apart like once it hits like out of the email realm. So it just goes to show that it's so important to test all those parts, and don't forget what happens after the email too.
Yeah. So I learned a ton of this Hangout, and I know that we have a couple questions. The first one that we got was, and I'm not sure how many of you guys are part of like list management, But what are your thoughts on like doing unengaged campaigns for people in your lists and just sort of cleaning out your database every once in a while based on unengagement, so that can maybe like boost your conversion rates or just have a healthier list? Like, have any of you guys ever done any of that stuff, and what are the best practices around that?
I wish I could magically put our email marketing manager, Erin, in the Hangout to answer this question. We actually just wrote about this recently on the Litmus blog. I know they're listening, the team back at the office, so they'll probably dig up the blog post and post it to Twitter here. But absolutely, like, engagement or a lack of engagement isn't only a performance issue for your business, it can be a deliverability problem. So more and more delivery anymore and spam isn't about like text or content. Like, if you put free in your subject line, that's generally fine these days. But what happens is if people are not clicking, not opening, not replying, not moving your emails around in their inbox, that's an indicator to a company maybe like Gmail that they're just not interested in getting your emails anymore. And you don't have to mark it as spam, like they don't have to put free in your subject line, but if you just simply are sending emails that no one cares about and no one's interacting with, you're going to start automatically going to the spam filter. Not in every case, but that's definitely a factor. So re-engagement campaigns, making sure that you're regularly kind of going back to your list and saying, hey, if someone hasn't opened, clicked, like purchased, whatever your criteria are, on a fairly frequent basis, it can actually start to affect your deliverability as a whole and not just like your email marketing metrics.
Definitely. Yeah, and I've seen different approaches too. When I was at Wayfair, we would do a bunch of bucketing, so more like cadence frequency testing, and that would all start from like your initial welcome email, because I think that's a huge barometer of actually how engaged these people might be. So right off the bat, start measuring to see if they're actually opening, and if they're opening, clicking, and kind of bucketing those people that way. Because then you can change the frequencies depending on your scheduling. If you're sending an email daily, then obviously you want to have different types there. And I think sometimes it's tricky when you're suppressing people and then trying to bring them back. Kind of ramping them up again can be really tricky because you don't want them to forget about you and then basically come across even more spammy if out of the blue you're back. So that's another thing to be aware of.
Especially if you're like a startup that's like launching a new product, because lack of frequency is just as bad as no frequency at all. So say like, I've had this happen before, I signed up for some new company or like a Kickstarter or something, and then like halfway, like 6 months later, they've changed their name 3 times, they're building a completely different product, they pivoted, and they're sending me emails, and I'm like, did I sign up for this? Like, who is this, So that's huge too, is, you can't send an email like once a quarter and expect everyone to be super engaged, but then if you send, 2 or 3 emails a day, which isn't out of the realm of possibility for retailers, say around the holidays, there's a balance in there, and there's a lot of factors that play into it.
Yeah, our blog team also recently ran an unengaged, like unsubscribe campaign. And, for the marketers out there who are in charge not just for email but for blogging and social and everything else, I would highly recommend just taking a look at all of your lists and seeing, if there's low engagement. That definitely helped the health of our blog team's list, so it's something to try out in all of your marketing. And then one final question. We have like 60 seconds left, but if any of you guys have any favorite tools out there, obviously Litmus and HubSpot have our email tools, but do you have any other like cool, tools or hacks or blogs that you follow?
I personally love Campaign Monitor's blog. I also, just as far as like tools are concerned, of course, besides Litmus and HubSpot, you mentioned Trello earlier. They're actually a great project management tool for like small to medium-sized teams for managing stages of email process. So if you're trying to like struggle with getting your team all on the same page or communicating progress or just even making assignments, I find Trello to be a great tool.
Nice.
Yeah, besides tools, I guess, a couple of resources I find really useful, especially for understanding mobile email design, are Campaign Monitor's blog's great. MailChimp also has some really good content. And there's a couple of people that are routinely talking about mobile email design. Especially there's an agency in the UK called Action Rocket, and they have and Action Rocket Labs, I think, is their blog, their development blog, that they're really good at breaking down and helping people understand different mobile approaches and different coding techniques. So I found that really useful. There's a couple of people writing on Medium too. Just search for email design. There's some really interesting articles there. But that's definitely a little bit more design and development focused, but that's where I come from. But if you're trying to understand those mobile approaches, that's really useful.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I've always followed Litmus. Obviously, in previous roles, I'd worked with Return Path, which is deliverability, and they have a pretty good blog too. When I was working more retail e-commerce, there were some sites out there that would kind of collect templates into one page. So one that comes to mind was Milled.com, MILLED.com. It's kind of a different approach. They were a little bit more repositioned, but it was kind of nice rather than, as a marketer, subscribing to a million emails and just trying to categorize them on my own and see what everyone else was doing. It was more of a site where you can kind of see them all by brand or by industry. So I'm trying to actively search for more sites like that.
That reminds me, Really Good Emails is a site that does that. So they aggregate tons of different emails, inspirational, they make commentary. So yeah, Really Good Emails. They've got some really good emails.
They've actually been writing a lot too on Medium and kind of breaking down different design trends and approaches and strategy behind email campaigns. So yeah, they're really on the ball with their content.
And if this kind of stuff really interests you, I'll put in a very quick last-minute plug. We have something called the Email Design Conference that Litmus runs. Literally 2 days of content that's nothing but stuff like this. And then HubSpot has a conference too, Inbound. So if you dig the in-person education and really kind of just want to get your hands really deep in this stuff, come to an in-person event and hang out with us and learn.
Love that CTA, Justine. Okay, cool. So if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to tweet at Litmus app at HubSpot with the hashtag mobile hangout, and we'll try and answer any of your follow-up questions. I'll send out a recording again with the slides, and then probably some links to Litmus's blog because they have amazing content on email. But thank you for joining. Thank you for all the speakers. Amazing content. It's nice hanging out with you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Yep.